Home actually is in connections. So wherever my friends are, the ones that feel like home to me, that's actually where home is. Using that as my personal definition has allowed me to feel more grounded and less lost as a nomad.
Welcome to the Travel Not to Escape podcast. I'm your host, Jolene on the Go, solo female traveler and creative entrepreneur. Think of me as your skydive instructor, empowering you to take the leap into solo travel to push past your fears and transform your life. Join me every Tuesday as we explore the world of solo travel with purpose and discover how you can use it for your personal transformation, learn how to make meaningful connections around the world, and reignite your spirit of play. We aren't just talking about traveling to find ourselves anymore. We're all about doing the work to understand who we authentically are, breaking through our limiting beliefs, and taking the leaps to manifest lives we are excited about. Through interviews, solo episodes, and meditations, each episode is packed with practical tips, strategies, and inspiring stories from guests who have transformed their lives through solo travel. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting out on your journey, the Travel Not to Escape podcast is here to inspire and empower you to solo travel with purpose. Strap on your helmet. We're about to jump headfirst into the journey of a lifetime. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to today's Travel Not to Escape episode. This is part two, where in the previous episode where we had Juul on, a PhD researcher from the Netherlands who's studying the effects of moving early in life and whether there's a correlation with the digital nomad lifestyle. And in this episode, I'm going to be sharing my interview where Juul asked me all of the tough questions about my childhood and how I became a digital nomad and how I currently navigate this lifestyle. There is a trigger warning I'm placing on this episode for those that may have some sensitivities around domestic violence. We don't dive into it that deeply, but it is covered briefly as part of my childhood. And I'm going to give you all a raw and vulnerable look into my journey of transformation. So let's dive in.
So we're going, if you can kind of explain what we're doing, like that would be helpful.
I always sort of start with a brief introduction about yourself, who you are, where you come from, a little bit about your family background and the type of family that you grew up in, and then it goes into the moving part. That's the most important thing for my research, whether you moved as a child, whether you moved, like how you experience the moving part now. And I also have some questions about the social relationships, friendships back home and here, these kind of, yeah. So if you don't have any questions, you might start with introducing yourself briefly.
I guess I've been traveling as a solo traveler since 2014. I'm originally from the Philippines. I was born in the Philippines. I moved when I was 4 to the US. I lived in California growing up, and then I moved to San Diego to start university. And then I actually lived in San Diego on my own for 10 years before I made the change to move to Chicago. Lived in Chicago for a few years until the pandemic hit, and that's when I started nomading.
So what do you do for your work?
So I'm building a business focused on solo female travel empowerment, and it's something that is really tied to my purpose of helping other women live a life that's meaningful for them. And what I want to do with solo female travel is help women use it as the vehicle to transform their lives. I found that as I've traveled, it's changed who I am and allowed me to create a life that I'm really happy and excited about. And I want that same thing for other women. And through the
Mm-hmm.
process, I've also found the importance of meaningful connections and also the importance of getting back in touch with your inner child and playing more. And that contributes to my overall happiness. And I want to help other women integrate that as well. So I'm running workshops, hosting a podcast, hosting a community, all towards the same mission.
Yeah, nice. So what type of family did you grow up in? You started in the Philippines, you said, and then you moved. So
Hmm.
do you have brothers, sisters?
Yeah, so I'm the youngest of a family of four. So there's four siblings total. My parents are no longer together. My like actual birth parents. When I so my mom actually left the Philippines before I did. So she left close to when I was born to go to the US,
Mm-hmm.
and in that process, leaving my dad as well. So then I came 4 years later to join her.
And were the kids like your older brothers and sisters then moving with your mom already, or you stayed with your father, or was it
Yeah,
every
no,
kid
we
stayed
we
with the
didn't
father?
we didn't live with our dad. So my family was actually pretty chaotic, and my dad was abusive, and so we had to kind of leave that situation. My
Okay.
mom did especially. So my siblings and I, for the first 4 years after my mom went to the U.S., we went and lived with my grandmother and an aunt, and
Okay.
they raised us for 4 years before my mom was able to take us to the US and then live with her.
Okay. You went with like all the siblings together then to the US?
So, three of us went to the US. One of my brothers actually remained in the Philippines because he has a mental disability.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he wasn't able to come with us because of visa purposes and also like lifestyle and care purposes.
So when you moved to the US, did you immediately move back in with your mom, or?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was four, my mom had remarried to someone
Mm-hmm.
that was American, and she and him raised me, my sister, and my older brother. And my eldest brother remained in the Philippines, being taken care of by my aunt.
And if you look back then on the childhood, maybe specifically the part in the US, could you say sort of how where you were in financial, were you more like lower, middle, upper class?
Very low. Yeah, yeah. So when we were in the Philippines, the reason my mom left was because we were in poverty. She
Mm-hmm.
had to collect cans off of the side of the road to feed us in the Philippines. Like that's kind of how poor we were. And going into the US, my mom actually had no support system. So she was a nurse in the Philippines, but that doesn't mean anything when you go to the US. So she
Mm-hmm.
worked as a security guard, she worked as a maid, like she really worked all the odd jobs to be able to get us there. And so by the time I was four, she had just finished her licensing for her nursing. So
Mm-hmm.
she was working like a CNA position. So no money at all, really. Probably like basic minimum wage to raise a family of
Yeah.
four. So we weren't in a good place. So very, very poor.
Yeah. And was that all like all your childhood as you remember it?
Yeah, for the most part, like money has always been an issue for us. I remember like lots of fighting over money. I think that it was only maybe as I came into high school that it was a little easier. Maybe because I also started working myself, so I
Yeah.
wasn't as dependent, but money definitely was always tight and always an issue. And I even
Yeah.
for university, I ended up taking out a lot of student loans to go to university, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up getting like Pell Grants, which are grants that are given to lower income households. So
Oh
definitely was
yeah.
always an
So
issue.
yeah, governmental support. Yeah.
Hmm.
And how is that now? What if like I mean you started traveling? Was there then a financial component that so support from somewhere to allow you to travel? You saved yourself a lot, or how did it go?
I went to university and got a degree in neuroscience, and then used that to be able to work in a lab. I worked my way up through healthcare consulting as well as the
Mm-hmm.
tech industry. And I went from, making minimum wage at a call center at the age of 23 to making six figures in tech by the time I quit my job. So
Oh
uh,
yeah.
I fully supported myself since I was 18, and really kind of climbed that corporate ladder to be able to do so. So when I came time to make the shift into nomading, my first couple of years actually was still remote through the jobs that I had. So I had
Mm-hmm.
worked in healthcare consulting my first year in remote in the US. And then the second year, I had worked in a biotech SaaS company remotely. And then it was only December of last year that I made the shift to start really pushing on my own business. And I relied on some of the savings investments that I cashed out for this year essentially. And then I
Yeah.
also have been supplementing with content creation. So I have some brand deals with some partners that also is a form of income.
Yeah. And so now, if something happens, would you feel that you can financially fall back on your mother, or not at all?
No, no, I don't have family support.
No. And
Yeah,
you
they
still have
are
contact
working
with?
on their own retirement.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. So, is there no
Mhm.
contact with your dad anymore, or do you have
I
some
think
contact?
he passed away
Okay.
recently, but I had zero contact with
Yeah.
him from birth.
When you lived with your mom, you said you first moved to California.
Yeah, we moved to California, Orange County.
And can you take me sort of, I don't know if you've moved a lot during your childhood as well,
Yeah.
and like,
Okay, so I was 4 when I came to the US, and we lived in an apartment, and it was a rather small apartment. I think it was honestly like a one-bedroom apartment, and there were four of us. There were three children, two adults. So
mm-hmm,
that wasn't going to work as we grew up. Also, so I moved around a lot in Orange County. So from the age of 4 until 18, my family was constantly moving, and
mm-hmm,
it was a little chaotic. But
yeah,
the yes, so it's like we moved to a condo for a year, and then actually I think when I started and I went to
mm-hmm,
school there from kindergarten until third grade. So I remember
mm-hmm,
that. So I think
yeah,
that was like in two different apartments that we had, the kindergarten and the third grade. And then at fourth grade, we moved to a different location. I went to a different school. And then we moved again, and I went to a different school in fifth and sixth grade. And
already
then
moved three schools.
yeah. So I went to
Yeah,
three schools in my primary.
mm-hmm,
And then when I moved into seventh and eighth grade, we were in a different location, and that was also a different school.
yeah,
And then I went to high school, and then I think we moved again prior to that. And and then for high school, I think we actually stayed in that place for 4 years. So that was a little bit more
yeah,
stable. And then I went to university, and then I could do my own thing. So, but then
yeah,
also in university, I moved around a lot because that's just the nature of being a college student. So,
yeah.
so there's that as well.
So, do you think that, I don't know whether these moves were long distance moves, because in the US you have to change schools if you go out of the district, right? So, was
Yeah,
it very long distance moves or just enough to change school?
enough to change schools. I think it wasn't like there were maybe 20-minute drive between each one.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it was like financial reasons, a lot of it was family fights and just things of that nature. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there was just a lot of change that we had to go through.
And if you look back on that, do you think that has changed you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've been doing a lot of inner child work recently, and actually, I think it's the foundation of why I want to do what I am doing now, helping women transform their lives, like regardless of where you started from. I think that's like the key because I think if you saw my life now, you probably wouldn't know the history. Like we just met even, right? And you probably didn't
Yeah.
realize the chaos of my life in the background, but because I've lived through it and I can see other women in that same position, I want to be that voice to kind of help them realize that
Yeah.
no matter how chaotic your upbringing is, you can make a life for you.
And do you remember still that how it was for you as a child to like the move itself? Was it more the stress sort of belonging to the move that was the hardest thing, or the move itself? And of course, if you change school, you also change your social network again, and
Hmm.
probably the friends are different. You have to build up everything again.
Yeah, and I think that, well, the hardest part for me was the chaos that started the move.
Yeah.
So, the reason we moved in the first place was because of money or family fighting. And or like police getting called or like, there's like a lot more layers to the reason we moved.
Yeah.
um like kidnappings and whatnot. So there was a lot of things that were in there that prompted
Yeah.
us to move, and the chaos surrounding that of like having cops being called on your family because they're fighting, or like my step sibling being kidnapped by her mother, and like there's just so many layers that go into it that I don't remember the actual moves themselves, like the physical moving.
Yeah.
I just remember the chaos that prompted the moves,
Yeah.
and also just the aftermath of having to adapt to a new school. And children are very cruel. They get it from their own upbringings, and I think it's also a way that they lash out from whatever they're kind of going through that they can't understand or express. And so I was bullied pretty badly growing
It's it's just so beautiful to see how much you build up
up.
from all of this. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, yeah. You have probably so much resilience.
Yeah, I was really shy when I was younger. I actually didn't have many friends because I moved around a lot, and I was also like the weird immigrant that like I was wearing thrift store clothes, and my mom dressed me in a weird way, and
Oh,
there was just a lot of things I think like self-worth, confidence-wise just wasn't there. So I mean, and also, oh, I wasn't allowed to have friends. Also, I forgot about that. So my
oh,
mom was
why?
very strict because of the whole fact that she took so many risks to leave the Philippines to come and make a better life. It's that same immigrant story of you're sacrificing so much. My mom was working
Yeah,
20 hours a day, like 7 days a week, in order to provide. Like I barely saw her. So with that much pressure that she had on herself to be able to provide for
mm-hmm.
us, I wasn't really allowed to not go to school and not
Oh
succeed
yeah,
in school. So it was like, well,
yeah,
I did all these things for you. You better be working your ass off in school and not hanging out with friends. So like I remember people would like try to come over, like neighbors would try to come over and play, and like I'd be like hiding, and she would say, No, my daughter's not here, you should go study, like she's studying."
oh
So it was
yeah,
actually like on top of like being like the weird outsider person that was constantly new, I also wasn't really allowed to have friendships because I was
yeah,
supposed to be working.
yeah, yeah. So the school pressure was definitely on by,
Hmm.
yeah. And how was it with your brothers and sisters then? Because you were together in one house, or how's your
Yeah.
relationship?
I'm actually not close with my siblings. I
Hmm.
think that unfortunately, because of the shared family trauma that we had, they never processed that themselves. And when you're going through traumatic things and you're not processing it or looking inward, you start to go outward in order to
Mm-hmm.
release some of that pain. And so I think that inadvertently they ended up causing me more pain without realizing it. So I'm not
Yeah,
really in contact with them.
yeah. And are you now still in contact with your mom then, back home, or?
Yeah, no, my mom actually is my one family member that I'm in close contact with.
Yeah.
And I think
And
it's
how?
because I appreciate the sacrifices now that I'm actually her age now at 34 that she was when she first got to the US. So there's been a lot
Yeah,
of healing that I've done in order to understand the perspective that she had at this age I am now and having the situation that she had to go through.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I my relationship with my mom is a lot better because I think I've put myself in that position.
yeah. And how do you keep contact? Is it with phone calls, or you text, or you go back to
Yeah,
visit her?
so yeah, I usually visit like once a couple times a year, depending on holidays and how that lines up. I usually
Mm-hmm.
spend the holidays with her. And I usually FaceTime maybe once every few weeks, and we'll FaceTime for an hour. She's actually going to be in the Philippines for the holidays, so I'll be leaving Bali or Thailand, wherever I am at that point, and heading to the Philippines to celebrate with them.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. And do you remember still when the decision to go for traveling, where it come from? I didn't know. I don't know if you during university you already moved or traveled a lot, or was this then? How does it go? Like to get
Yeah,
this to the step?
Yeah, so I share this story a lot because I think that it's really important, and it goes back to why I'm doing what I'm doing. So
Mm-hmm.
I um was in high school and I was focused solely on like, so my mom wanted me to be a doctor, like typical route. So I was in all like classes, scientific, mathematics, like very like tough STEM focused stuff. But luckily, the high school said you need to have some art in your life. So that was actually a requirement, is to like take an honors course in like an art focus. So
Oh, okay.
I took art history, and luckily I did because my art history teacher was such an inspiring woman. So she was just so eccentric of a person that, and like the way that she described art history too, like she would explain it with so much passion and like teach us to look at painting. She's like, okay, if you're gonna look at a painting, you have to do it in all these different angles. You have to look at it up close, then like walk 10 steps back and then walk to the side, look at how the light and the texture changes, and walk to the other side. And she really encouraged me to see paintings in person because the way that she was teaching it was on slides, was in books, and she was like, you are just gonna, your life is gonna change when you see these in person. So she's also kooky in a way that when there was a favorite artist of hers and they had a gallery opening or some type of art show, she would get a substitute teacher and go on her own. So she would solo travel to these art galleries. And like I remember her going to New
Mm-hmm.
York for a long weekend because she wanted to go see this artist. And it was just so different from what I had known from like my family and like that whole struggle mentality and just like the survival mentality. So like this woman leaving for a few days, leaving her job for a few days to go chase an artist. And it was like,
Yeah.
like a rap art. It's a very interesting woman. She also said that she had studied abroad in Rome. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of her passion came from when she studied abroad in Rome. And I didn't know what studying abroad was at that time. And I kind of just tucked it in the back of my head. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, you know, something, another thing that she
Yeah.
does. So
Yeah.
when I was in my second year of university, I was walking down the like row of tables of people just like handing out flyers. And there was a study abroad table, and it was study abroad in Rome. And I was like, oh my God, she wasn't kidding. Like, it's an actual thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was it's funny because in order to get the clearance, I needed to get like immunization records, and so I had to go back to my high school, and it was really fun because
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell her like, "Hey, I'm studying abroad because of you." That was actually the
Wow.
last time I saw her, but because I haven't been back to high school since then. But it was really nice because yeah, she's the reason that prompted me to study abroad. And when I studied abroad, it was actually the first time that I chose subjects because of what I wanted to do. So the subject that
Mm-hmm.
I studied when I was in Rome was art history. It wasn't related to science. It was actually a
Yeah.
complete departure from my major, and I had to kind
Yeah.
of work it through. But because I studied abroad at the age of 20, that was my first trip just because I wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
not because I had to. And that changed my life. Like I remember
Yeah.
at the end of that trip, I was really, really sad. I was crying. I remember crying on the bridge because I remember thinking at that moment, like, wow, like this person that I've become over the last few months, I'm like so social. I'm like able to go on all these adventures while I'm still working. And I realized at that moment that that was the life I wanted, but I
Mm-hmm.
had to go back to a life that I didn't choose, a life that I was like really dreading. So I made myself a promise at that point. I said, in 5 years, no matter what, I have to go back to Rome. Like I like was like 100% dead set on like I don't know how I'm gonna do it because I have like no money and I am a student loaned up. But I was like, okay, by the age of 25, like celebrating my birthday, I have to do it in Rome. And within 10 years, I need this to be my life. Like I like actually need this to be my life because I already got a
Mm-hmm.
taste of what I wanted my life to look like. I just didn't know how I was going to get back there. So that's my origin story for for wanting
Yeah.
to be a
Wow.
nomad.
Yeah.
So within
And
within 5 years, I actually did start. So my first solo travel trip, my first like pure one, was at the age of 25. When I celebrated my birthday, I was actually going to go with friends, but like no one at that age really had money or could coordinate travel. And I was like, well, I made myself this promise, I have to go. So I
Yeah.
celebrated my 25th birthday solo in London, and that kicked off my 1 month backpacking trip by myself.
Yeah. So do you still remember how you felt sort of the moment right before you left? Like going for the
Yeah,
first time by yourself with your backpack?
yeah. I had like a huge backpack, as most like
First timers
Europeans.
mistakes.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah, I've retired that backpack. My back hurts. Yeah, it was like a 40-pound backpack I was carrying around. It was awful. Um, and because you wanted to save money and like stuff it and get through the Ryanair flight.
Yeah.
I think I was a little scared. Um, I was still at this point where I don't think I knew what I was really doing,
Hmm.
and I think this also leads to why I want to help other women, because my thinking was I'm gonna go find myself. I'm gonna go re-meet this version of myself when I was age
Yeah.
20 that was like having so much fun, and like that's what I'm gonna get back to. And honestly, I didn't love my first solo travel trip. I was paranoid. I was scared. I was staying in a hostel in London in like kind of a seedy part of town. I remember going up to my bunk bed my first day and I ripped my jeans. Like I only had brought one pair of jeans and I ripped it. And I was like, oh my God, like it's all it's all so bad. So I remember feeling at first I was like excited and like, oh, like I'm gonna go find myself. It's gonna be so life changing. And then day one I land and like everything just is like scary and kind of
Yeah.
going wrong. So
And when or how did it flip? Because you kept on traveling, so
I kept
apparently.
on traveling. Yeah. Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I have a diary from that time, and I remember I reread that diary. I have it with me actually, and I reread it, and I was like writing in that I hate London. These are all the things why, and it was just hilarious. I was like, why am I doing this solo travel trip?
Hmm.
Um, and okay, so it started to flip because the way that I was doing solo travel for the first couple of weeks of this trip, I was staying in hostels. I took a bus. I didn't have anything planned. So the only thing I knew that I was doing during this trip was I was going to fly into London. I was going to fly out of Rome. And
Yeah.
in between, I was going to go see my friends in Berlin because I had some friends that I met in the US that lived in Berlin. So, but they were in the middle and I had to get there and then make my way back to Rome. Nothing else was planned. I was doing this like completely like, we're just going to fly and
Hmm.
figure it out. So I remember in London, I was hating London, celebrated my birthday there, and I was like, gotta leave. So then I asked, and this was back in the time in 2014 where GPS wasn't really a thing. I don't think I even had a
Hmm.
smartphone. I didn't have a
Yeah.
computer with me. I was using like the hostel computer. I remember.
Yeah.
And I asked the guy
Such a
that
different time if you think
it's such
about
a difference.
it.
This was like 10 years ago, right? So like
Yeah,
it's
I
so
also remember
wild.
like waiting in line to use the hostel computer to know, like to book a next accommodation and
Yeah.
endlessly the books like that there were in the hostel that were super old to use that for your
Yeah.
travels.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
like
it's
I
super
don't know where
different
I'm
now.
going. It's so much easier now. Like you really
Yeah.
had to like wanted to go if you were gonna go because this was not easy. And I was like frustrated searching on this slow freaking computer at the hostel. And I was like, I don't know where I don't know how to get to anywhere. I don't know where to go. And I asked the guy that worked at the front desk, I'm like, where should I go? I need to go to Berlin on this date, and I have like these dates free, and I just have to make my way in that direction. He recommended a bus, and I was like, a bus? Like, where? Where am I taking this bus to? He's like, you should take the bus to Amsterdam from London. It takes 8 hours. It was like the longest bus ride of my life, and it was hell. Like I honestly was like, I hate this man. So I was like doing all these things last minute. I was like asking people that like probably didn't, he was like male perspective on where I should go. You should go in Amsterdam. You should stay in this hostel in the red light district. It was the worst hostel experience I've ever had. I walked in, there was graffiti everywhere, not even like the good kind. It was just like the sketchy kind.
Mm-hmm.
And there was like a half naked man on one of the beds, and I was like, I can't. What am I doing?
Yeah.
So I
So what made
realized
you?
that Yeah, so I realized that a lot of the times when people recommend things to you, it's based on their perspective. And I was taking all these things in because I was like, oh, well, other people have traveled more than me, like they should know and they can help guide me. And I was like trusting all these
Mm-hmm.
opinions. And finally, I was just so tired. I did finally make my way to Berlin, and Berlin was amazing. I got to celebrate, like they won the World Cup that year, and so it was just like really fun. And I stayed with some friends there, so that like changed my trip. And then afterwards, I realized I was trying to do this like backpacker solo travel experience that everyone like you see in the movies and everyone like recommends. And I was miserable. I was like, this isn't for me. I'm gonna leave, you know? So then in Berlin, I made the decision to like do things the way that I wanted to. So I stayed for an Airbnb for the very first time. So instead of staying in a hostel, I booked, and I was going to make my way down to Austria. I was going to go to Czech Republic. I was going to do Budapest and do it all by train and bus. That was the original plan. After
Mm-hmm.
Berlin, I was like, you know what? I just want to stay in Tuscany for a week. Like that's all I want to do. So I booked a flight from Berlin to Florence, and I booked my very first Airbnb, and that was like the first time I was solo traveling, I feel like, with more of my intuition as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this is what you should do. So it was
Yeah.
lovely. Like I met so many people. I got to see all the art that I wanted to see in the Uffizi Gallery. I had a week to really like settle into the city and not like constantly pack and unpack this backpack. So that was really nice. And then after that, I made my way into Rome, and that felt like home again. So
Yeah.
the last 2 weeks of this journey helped me realize that like I wasn't liking it because I wasn't kind of living it the way that I would normally live it, and I was
Mm-hmm.
putting my life in other people's opinions and advice, and I really just needed to like sit and ask myself like, what do I actually want to get out of this experience? Like, how do I want to
Yeah.
feel? And at the end of the day, I wanted to see some art and I wanted to meet some people. And so I started to lean into those things that I really cared about.
Yeah. So did you, from this long travel, moved immediately back into the nomadic life, or was there that phase in between?
Yeah, so this was 2014 and I didn't become a nomad until 2020. So
Okay.
it was so from 2014 to 2020, there was 6 years of going back. So I realized, okay, I love solo travel now. Like I'm able to do it the way that I want to do. Came back home and I was burnt out from my job. I was in a 10-year relation. Well, at that point, I don't think it was 10 years. Maybe it was like 7 years. But like it was a long-term relationship with my like high school boyfriend. And I was in this relationship. He didn't like to travel. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't very supportive in that sense. And so I kind of was stuck in this life that I had created that I didn't really want to live. So I think what happened after I went on this solo trip was I realized that this version of myself while I was solo traveling was like so social and so adventurous and just like vibrant. And then I came back and I was antisocial. I was isolated. I didn't really have any friends. I worked 16 hours a day. I was going to the hospital because I had stress rashes and I had panic attacks, and I was actually really depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an eating disorder too. So like on top of all of that, it was like there were so many things that I came back into my normal life, and it was like, why am I living this life? What can I do? But you don't know how to change. It's a long process. So 2014 to 2016, I think after that, those trips became like my two most depressed years because I realized I could see again what I saw when I was 20, that travel really was the way that I wanted to live. But then I
Yeah.
came back for 2 years and I like declined rapidly into depression to the point where in 2016 I hit a rock bottom and was actually pretty suicidal. So like I got to the point where I was like, I don't know what the point is, and I just kept asking like, what is the point? What is the point? And I couldn't give myself a valid enough answer that
Mm-hmm.
that made sense. So I finally one morning I went to work and I was crying. I just couldn't stop crying. So like I moved to the stairwell so that people wouldn't see me in my office crying. And I started doing some Google searches. I was like, okay, what's the point in life? Need help? Question mark. Google, right? Like, and I don't know what happened and what I searched, but I ended up getting the profile on Psychology Today of a therapist. And I actually
Mm-hmm.
screenshotted it. And on her profile, it had like the exact same words that I asked. It was like, what's the point? Like, need help? Are you burnt out from work? I'm like, yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Uh, so then I booked a therapy appointment that same week. And I started seeing her like every single week for a couple of years until she actually helped me through anxiety. She helped me through my workaholic lifestyle. She helped me through like my health and my relationships, and my it helped me open up to friendships as well again. And to the point where in 2017, I actually ended my 10-year relationship. I gave up my apartment in San Diego and all of my things. I transferred into the Chicago office with the same job, but then I was promoted into a different role so that it was like hopefully less stressful. So I made all these changes essentially because I realized at that point I wasn't living the life that I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
and it was either I stopped living or I worked towards the other route.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so then I moved to Chicago, and Chicago was amazing. I finally was able to become the person that I wanted to be and live that in like myself. Like I really needed to be out of a relationship. I needed to just be me and figure out who that was. And I lived there for 3 years until I kind of hit the same plateau in terms of my career. The pandemic really made me question, like, am I on the right
Yeah.
track? Like I was pretty successful in Chicago. I was had the career, I had the friends, I had at that time a relationship, and like all the things that like go into you should be successful at this age, right? And I got to that point. I was like, wow, this is like the life everyone would want to live based off of like the movies. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not happy. I'm like not happy at all. And I know that there's something else that I need to do. Um, so I gave up everything again and then started Nomad. So that's kind of the Nomad journey. It
Yeah.
was like a process of like giving up a lot of things that I had worked really hard for. Yeah, and then and saying like, okay, I appreciate you, thank you, you served me well for the time that I had you, but I want something different now.
Yeah. So was that also what happened with the friendships? You sort of ended it, or is it you just said I'm going for traveling, but without an end? Or
At that point, because of therapy, she enabled me to make genuine connections. And because I made genuine connections in San Diego, I was able to actually make, I'm still best friends with a lot of people that I had
mm,
left behind in San Diego.
yeah.
So I continue those relationships from San Diego to Chicago. And the same thing happened when I became a digital nomad is I maintained those relationships from Chicago onto now. And like my best friends that I would consider like my emotional support system and generally just my people, like they're all from after I started going to therapy and I made them
Yeah.
in San Diego and Chicago. So I still see them at least once or twice a year, and I have FaceTime conversations with them at least once every few months, if not more
Mm-hmm.
frequently, depending on the person.
Yeah. So do you think that friendships really changed when you left, or not that much?
They changed in a different way. So not in a bad way, not in a good way, but they change, right? And like they don't have to be one or the other. They just evolve into whatever phase it becomes. So, and some actually you get closer to, and it
Mm-hmm.
depends, I think, more on the part in life that that friend is in and how congruent it is to what you're going through.
Yeah.
So I find that like I find that a lot of my friendships get stronger over time rather than diminish, but those are the ones that I put emphasis on, that I invest in. And
Yeah,
they're not necessarily like there's ones that I've let go of those connections, but those were like intentional because I
yeah,
wanted to invest more in other connections. So the ones that
yeah.
I have kept around me, they've become stronger because I was intentional in making them stronger.
And how is that with the people you meet on the travels?
Hmm.
Is it
It's
you
great.
keep
Yes.
how you build up the friendships or contacts with people on the road, and whether you keep in contact with them? It's more short
Yeah.
term, but
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's maybe I might be a kind of an unfair subject because I'm actually creating a program to teach people how to make connections and maintain them. So I'm like, this is like my zone of genius, I would say. Um, but specifically for people that I've met while traveling, this is what I wanted to teach people to do because I realized I actually do this and I think other people would really benefit from doing it as well is I make genuine connections when I'm traveling. And those friends that I've made traveling, like they're just like the friends that I had when I was in San Diego or Chicago long term. Like there's ones that I will FaceTime at a particular frequency, or I will actually see them in a different country. So I have a
mm-hmm.
friend who I met in Puerto Vallarta, which was one of my first years of nomading in 2021. And I spent 6 months in Puerto Vallarta. We got really close. I actually ended up seeing her in Costa Rica in 2022. And actually, no, sorry. I saw her again in Mexico City twice. So we did two Mexico City trips together. I saw her in Costa Rica and celebrated my birthday with her in 2022. And then this year, I actually spent 3 weeks with her in Medellin, Colombia. We both met in Colombia and nomaded together there. So like a lot of my connections that I want to keep, I am intentional in planning moments where we meet up again. Or some friends that I had in Argentina, for example, we all coordinated going to Chicago. Well, I was going to be in Chicago already, and so they coordinated meeting up and hanging out while we were in Chicago. So we had a girls' weekend while I was up there. I
Yeah.
have another nomad friend who she and I like we spent some time in Brazil this year together, and last year we did Portland. And we kind of scheduled time where we nomad together, whether it's like 1 week or like a few months, depending on like what works for us. Other friends, like I have a friend in Argentina where every week we schedule a 3 hour working session together. So she has goals, I have goals. We tell each other what those goals are.
Mm.
And for 3 hours, we're just on Zoom or Google Hangouts, and we have a shared whiteboard that we write our goals on a post-it, and
Oh,
like
that's
in
nice.
1 hour, yeah, it's like we complete it in 1 hour, then we take a break, we chat, and then do the next two rounds. So it depends on each friend, and I try to be intentional on how I keep in touch with each friend because some friends are just like not the type that want to text a bunch, right? They want
Yeah.
to, like I have another friend who like you can ask her as many things on text, but she'll just reciprocate it back and like, how are you doing? And but so I never actually understand like what she's going through. So with
Hmm.
her, I make sure that we plan a like a scheduled FaceTime so that I can just sit and listen to what she's going through and
Yeah.
like actually connect that way. So it depends on
Yeah.
each friend, but I think that there's the intentionality that goes behind like understanding how how do you want that friendship to look like and how are
Yeah.
you going to continue that connection.
So do you also do that sort of straight away already when you meet new people, that you kind of shift between this one is it's nice to say hi and bye, this one is maybe a bit more, and this one is someone I really gonna invest in and I keep into contact with them, or how do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So well, personally, I have, I think, an intuition already with certain people. Like, I already know based off of, I don't know, a vibe and energy,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it's going to be someone that I end up becoming long-term friends with. So I already kind of know that immediately. But I
Yeah.
think for people that don't, yeah, it's asking yourself how you feel with that person around. Like, do you
Yeah.
feel light? Or is when you meet that person, do you already feel drained and heavy? I think that's like an important question to ask. And there are a lot of people that I meet like on these nomading things. Like I'm constantly going to meetups, and there's a lot of people where I will still be really like myself and vibrant and cordial, but I already know I'm like, okay, no, I'm not. I'm gonna pull back, and I'm actually not going to engage with them one on one. Or there's some people where like I know that they probably aren't the type. I can sense like they're not the type to just like, oh yeah, let's hang out right away. So then I kind of allow those connections to be group connections until I see them multiple times and they warm up, and then I'll follow up and say, hey, like seen you a couple times, let's go grab lunch. And then
Yeah.
there's ones where like you just chat and it just feels really normal and casual
Yeah.
and easy. And those are the ones with like, hey, like I'm planning on doing this activity. Do you want to join me tomorrow?
Yeah.
So it depends on how you're feeling at the moment. And there's like certain questions that I feel like you have to ask yourself, understand your.
Yeah. Yeah. You're really conscious with that, not sort of letting you go with the flow too much. Because maybe, yeah, you did that already too much, you said, in the first solo
Yeah,
travel. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that like there's also like times where I'm not, you know, I'm just going to an event and I just want to experience the event. Because not all the times you want to be social in like the I want to make a
Mm-hmm.
friend today. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just want to do the activity because the activity is cool. And like if you meet anyone, it's a bonus. So like in Bali, I've been doing that a lot where I'm like, oh, it's like a meetup. Like I'll see just who I end up meeting, but I'm not necessarily like, oh, I'm gonna connect and connect for that purpose of having a long
Mm-hmm.
term friendship. I think I'm more in like networking mode in Bali because I want to see what other people are up to, like what are people doing with their lives. I'm just like genuinely like curious. So you could also approach it that way, where you could just be
Yeah.
curious about other people and then let it
Yeah.
flow. So I think they're all valid options depending on what you're looking
Yeah.
for.
So you do a lot of these meetups to meet people, or is it like
Yeah.
this is specifically for nomads, for
Yeah, I
digital
do a lot of
nomads?
meetups
Yeah.
and then I host my own as well. So
Oh,
the ones that I've hosted in like my past are like related to play. So I hosted a like relay race in Buenos Aires, and I like made up all the games, I bought all the supplies, and we all kind of just like played and competed against each other
mm-hmm.
it was like a really long day actually. I think it was like 8 hours. But everyone had a lot of fun. And then I've also hosted like a hey, let's go out to dinner and do salsa dancing kind of night as well. So it just
Yeah.
depends. And I think the ones that I've gone to for meetups a lot are like nomads or actually I like to do interest based meetups.
Okay.
So I go to like salsa classes or I go to art classes. I go to like foodie like restaurant events because I love good food. So I know what are the things that I like to do, and it's again like you go doing something that you already like to do, the people that you meet end up becoming a bonus and like an extra
Yeah.
thing. And it's almost
Yeah.
better that way because there's less pressure for you to like, oh, I have to make a friend. It's just more like, oh, we both like doing the same things together. Let's continue
Mm-hmm.
doing that.
Yeah. And I was wondering, the you said in the beginning, like, oh, maybe I the travel is different, of course, than nomadic travel. So, what would be your ideal travel pace? Now you're doing this
Mm.
for quite a long time.
Yeah, so I've realized in order to make this lifestyle sustainable, my ideal travel pace is 3 to 6 months. Because for me, what's really important is the community aspect. And I've stayed in a lot of places. Like I remember I was in Mexico City for a month and I met so many amazing women that first month, actually ones that I still talk to today. And like we're like doing collaborations on. But I just remember thinking like, oh, if I only had like a few more months with them, like these would be such solid friendships. It would be such a beautiful community. We'd be like doing so many fun things together. But we have 1 month and I'm leaving already, you know? So I remember like feeling that there and feeling that in a few other places that I lived in. And I was like, okay, it feels a little empty at 1 month. It feels very
Yeah.
superficial still, where you're like, oh yeah, we enjoy doing like same activities together, but I don't really know who this person is. And I think
Yeah.
that that's what ends up happening when you stay for less than a month is you get almost there. And so you get a
Yeah.
taste of connection, but you don't get the community aspect of it. So that's why at 3 months, I think like that's when you start to see people over and over again and you start to do things together that are more mundane. You don't have to just
Yeah.
always do the crazy like adventure activities together. Like you can just go grab a coffee and or go for a walk in the morning or during a break while you're both working. So it starts to be more of
Yeah.
those like you get to know each other more naturally
Yeah.
at like the 3 to 6 month part.
Yeah. And do you then stay also really in the same place, like the same apartment or the same
Hmm.
accommodation where you stay for the full period?
Yeah, I love that actually. So I realized one of the things that I really dislike is packing. I hate packing. And gosh, and like it's not just the packing, you have to pack and then you have to get a taxi and then you have to like move it upstairs somewhere else. Like a lot of these accommodations may not have uh whatchamacallit, elevators, right? Or like you might be
Mm-hmm.
like navigating on like cobblestones. So it's just not I don't like doing it. So the places that I've stayed at the longest, like in Puerto Vallarta, I was there for almost 7 months. And for 6 of those months, I was in the same apartment, and I really loved
Yeah.
that. And when you stay longer too, you can negotiate a deal with people, with
Yeah.
the renters, off
Yeah.
of Airbnb. So when you pay cash, it becomes cheaper to live there as
Yeah.
well. So I did that there. I also did that when I was in Buenos Aires, and I stayed for 6 months. And then when I came back for 3 more months, I actually stayed in the exact same apartment building. Um, but then there's like other places that I'm only at for like a month.
Oh yeah. What is it that then makes you want to leave again? If you are somewhere for six months, might
Yeah,
feel already a bit like your house, your home, but why do you want to leave then?
because I think deep down like at 6 months, I know I have to leave. There's this itch that like I get antsy. I feel like I need a new challenge. I think that's like one of the things is like I love staying long for a particular city and to get to really know it and get to know the people there. But I think in my heart of hearts, like I love seeing the world. I love being challenged. I love being inspired. And the work that I'm doing, the one that like I want to impact other people
Mm-hmm.
doing is needs me to stay inspired, needs me to stay challenged. And I
Yeah.
do that through changing location.
Yeah. And could you say that you feel home at the places where you are, or how does it? What is feeling home for you actually? How do you, would you define that?
Yeah, yeah. So home for me, I really recently realized this actually because when I was in the U.S., the U.S. never actually felt like home for me. Especially when like people are asking you like, "Oh, where are you from?" in the US and I say, "Oh, I'm from the US." And they're like, "No, no, no, where are you really from?" And I have to say, oh, "Okay, well, I'm originally Filipino, but I lived there when I was young." And then I went to the Philippines for the first time as an adult a couple months ago. So I celebrated my birthday in July and I was in the Philippines for a couple months and the same thing happened. I was like, "Oh, where are you from?" I was like, "Oh, I'm Filipino." And they're like, "No, no, no, where are you really from?" And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like I
Yeah.
neither of the places that people consider where you are from, I'm actually being accepted as from there. So
Yeah.
I had a lot that I had to kind of go through mentally and emotionally about that because you're like, okay, well, I don't really fit in the two places that I should fit in. So I realized that home actually is in connections. So wherever my friends are, the ones that like feel like home to me, that's actually where home is. So like if I go to Bali and I have like a friend or make a friend there and that feels really good and nourishing and whole, like this is home. And the
Yeah.
same thing, like Argentina for me is one of the places that I even went back to after 6 months, and then I did another 3 months there because of the community that was there, because of the people, and it feels like home because the people that feel like home are there.
Yeah.
And like same thing with my friends that I meet in different places in like the US. So like my friends from San Diego or Chicago, like I might not see them in San Diego or Chicago, but I feel like home when I'm with them. So I think that using that as my personal definition has allowed me to feel more grounded and less lost as a
Mm-hmm.
nomad.
Yeah. And is there something specific that you do when you arrive in a new place again to make it a bit more like your home, or you take stuff
Yeah.
or with you, or is there some routine that you do?
Yeah, so there is a specific routine that I have. So right away when I land somewhere, I think like some of the first few things are like logistics based. I'm like, okay, how do I stay in communication with people? I need to go get like a phone card, SIM card, figure out where all like the good Wi-Fi spots are for cafes, like that, like having a go-to place as a cafe or a restaurant makes me feel like, okay, I'm at least seeing familiar faces in these places. So
Mm-hmm.
you start to see like the connections, even just the people that work there.
Yeah.
I also maintain a routine of I try to chat with two different friends each week, depending on like their availability and kind of what's going on. Two friends or family. So like I chat with my mom and a friend this week, whether that's via text or via FaceTime. And I find that by keeping that continuity and that goal of like two per week really helps me feel grounded wherever I am,
Yeah.
and it's like friends from all over the world. So it could be a friend that I've known for 10 years or more, or a friend that I've known for a week. And then I also try to do the things. So there are like certain things that ground me. So finding a place that I can meditate and do yoga at, finding a salsa community, and a place that I can walk or run or, explore. So like having those things that I know make me feel grounded. I also do a massage when I land because that just makes your body feel good. Um, yeah, massage, salsa, sound healing, meditation, yoga. It's going to be different for every person, but I know me, and whenever I'm like going through a funk, like if I do those things, I'll I'll already feel better. So
Okay.
I think it's good to establish what makes you feel good and do those same things in every city.
Yeah. 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 Good point. Also, what you say with talking to the people you actually already know in a new
Hmm.
place, it's sort of that these friends are indeed the sort of the the continuity within all the moves then for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's the thing that people maybe don't realize. Like when people initially travel, they go for vacation, and so anyone that they meet on vacation is like a vacation friend, and they're like, oh, and then I'll
Hmm.
never see them again after that. But like this is my life, so everyone that I meet is part of my life, and if I'm investing
Yeah.
in this connection, it's gonna be a long-term connection, and it's not like a, oh,
Yeah.
I'm back in my real life, we don't have to talk anymore. It's like, no, this is my real life, so we're gonna
Yeah.
continue. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's that difference.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel like a vacation.
Yeah, yeah, that's the biggest thing with the nomading
Yeah.
is like the majority of the time you're still working and you're still doing the routines that make you feel whole. Now you just have the opportunity for the newness and it's like the challenges and the inspiration because you are somewhere that's unfamiliar.
Yeah. So how would you see your future in like a few years or maybe long term future? Do you see yourself keeping this nomadic lifestyle? Is that sustainable, or you see yourself settle in someday?
Oh, yeah, no. I don't like settling. Oh, that's such a bad word. My ideal 5 to 10 year plan is to to continue to do this for a bit, and in 5 to 10 years I want to start buying investment properties in my favorite cities, and I would love to
Hmm.
have a place in at least like one region. So like a place in Chicago, a place in Mexico, a place in Argentina, and then in Europe, I'd love a place in Spain, maybe a place in South Africa, and then in Asia, I'd want a place in Bali, for example. So I want to choose
Hmm.
all the places in the world that make me feel the most alive, the most nourished and whole, and where it's already built some community in, and then just rotate through all those different places. So when I'm there, I'm staying there and that's all my things. And when I'm not, then it's an Airbnb for other people to be able to go.
Yeah. And what makes it that you want to go sort of from full nomadic to let's say, rotation migration, sort of
Yeah.
the same places?
Yeah,
Is there something about that that appeals to you specifically?
I think part of that, and I mean, I would still be nomadic, but it would just be
Mm-hmm.
around the world. And like, yeah, I would still consider it nomad, but I think nomad with investments. So I
Yeah,
think that the part is like, one, I want to make money while I'm doing this. And right now I'm spending money on Airbnbs that the money doesn't go back to me. So I
yeah.
think business
So
wise,
you would
financially
go,
wise,
yeah. So you would go to your places then if you were there, and then you rent it out when you're not there.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So it would be like my investment property slash my piece of home all over the world. So then I
yeah,
can then rent it out to other people wanting to do the same thing. And it's kind of like giving back as well to other nomads. Um,
yeah,
and it would be nice to not have to carry all of my things around the world. So if I could have like I don't know, a closet in each place that I keep some stuff in. I think that would be
yeah,
amazing because I think some of the pains of digital nomading is having to lug all your things and I can only reset my suitcase when I'm back in the US. So then it's like I need like if I need a jacket in that particular place, like I won't have one unless I buy one. So like it would be nice to
yeah,
have a place where you can store things. And also a place that like you've decorated and it's to your liking because that's another pain as a nomad is you have to find places and you just have to be adaptable and okay with the fact that like I'm sitting on a wooden chair right now and it's uncomfortable. Whereas like if I had a place and I would get like a nice computer chair, a nice cushy like
yeah,
sofa. So I think there are certain comforts that come with like having your own place. And I think that like I'm still going to Nomad in the same way, but
mm-hmm.
I think in 5 to 10 years, my like financial goals align with wanting to create investment properties.
Yeah. So do you have a house still back in the US or not?
No, no, I have nothing.
No,
No,
no.
completely baseless. Yeah.
And do you see your future eventually family, kids, or you think, well, I would like to stay autonomous by myself?
Yeah, I think given my chaotic childhood that you now know about, um, I think that there's a lot within me that I've healed in order to, I don't know, get to the place where I'm at now. Because
Mm-hmm.
what I don't want to do is I don't want to repeat the cycle of what I grew up in, right? Like
Yeah,
I wouldn't wish the chaos that I lived through and the poverty that we went through on a child just coming into the world.
yeah,
So, and I also wouldn't wish the instability in like the parental relationships as well. And so,
yeah,
for me, in order to bring a child into the world and not um, kind of feel that overwhelming guilt, I would want to be in a stable partnership. So for me, like
mm-hmm.
it would have to be like I find a partner that's inspiring and challenging me and vice versa, and we're wanting to do the same lifestyle together. And only
Yeah,
then would I consider, okay, like let's bring in a child into this world because I feel like we're at a point where we can give it enough love and resources to be able to succeed in life. So I think
yeah,
until I get to that moment, that's not necessarily like there yet for me. So I think for me, it's more important that I find a partner that could do this, like that have the same values, same vision for life, and the same lifestyle
yeah,
needs, and then the family would go along with that.
yeah. So now you're not in a relationship?
No, I'm not. Yeah,
No. So would it be a sort of deal breaker if someone wants a settled life?
yeah. So
Yeah.
I've found when I was first starting the nomad journey, I was dating in the cities that I was um, traveling to, and I was dating locals, and like even in the U.S., I was still dating when I visited friends. And then I asked myself, like, what am I doing? Because everyone that I'm meeting works 9 to 5 in an office and wants to live in the suburbs and wants to have a traditional family. What am I doing? So as I
Yeah.
started, and my therapist asked me that too. She's like, "Really though, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess." So then what I realized was that it is better to go on less dates than to go on dates with people that you already know don't have the same values, vision, or lifestyle.
Yeah.
So I have been dating more intentionally because of that. So like the first couple of years, I'm like, oh, this is fun, and then actually the last year, I only started dating again when I went to poly, but I was for a year and a half, like went on zero dates because I had to make a lot of changes in my life in terms of this career, but also I wanted to be intentional in making sure that if I went on a date with someone, they are someone that is already traveling, not someone that
Mm-hmm.
needs me to train them on how to travel or,
Yeah.
is pushing them to want this lifestyle that I want because it's never going to work if they don't already want it for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would never settle down for someone for like for love.
Well, the thing is, it's like I think the settling down can look different for each person.
Yeah. True.
And for me, it looks a certain way that I described. And for other people, completely different. And I would not want someone to give up what their vision is for their life because of this relationship. I think that there's plenty of people in the world to be able to have the same values, vision, and lifestyle with someone and not have to compromise. Because compromise doesn't
Yeah.
actually mean you guys are getting what you want. Both people in a compromise are not happy, right? Because
Yeah.
I was in a relationship before the pandemic. Actually, during the pandemic, I was in a relationship, and actually, one of the reasons why I started nomading was because we were in a pandemic relationship, and then at the end, we realized when we asked each other like the tough questions of what do you see your life in the future? Like, what does it look like for you? And for him, he was like, I really just want to live in the suburbs of Chicago and have a family and once a year go out into the lake and just stare into the water in silence. That was his vision for his life. And I love this man, but I was like, I would probably murder you because I was so bored. I just needed something. I needed something to spark a light into my life. So I realized that that was not going to be a healthy relationship for like a long
Yeah.
term. And so we ended it because we wanted what was best for each other. Like he wanted me to have the adventures and be this adventurous spirit and meet people, and he's very much like introverted, just wants to have his peaceful lake time with his children. And I was like, okay, like we both want those things. The compromise between that was both of us staying in the city in Chicago and like
Yeah.
staying long term. And like neither of us wanted to just stay in like where we were at in Chicago. That just wasn't going to fulfill either of those visions. And so we had to make the hard decision to say,
Yeah.
I want what's best for you, even if that means it's not together.
Yeah. What is for you the biggest pro and the biggest con then of this lifestyle?
Ooh, the biggest pro is the freedom. I think the freedom to be able to choose your location and kind of just feel like, oh, I want to stay here longer and have the ability
Mm-hmm.
to do so. I think the biggest con is that you have to make a lot of decisions by yourself, and you have to start getting used to having to make these decisions fast and like stick with the results that come afterwards. And because I'm also building my own business, if I don't feel like doing something today, I don't have to, but I don't have the accountability to tell me that I need to work 8 hours today, right? So you are really
Yeah.
self-sufficient and you have to be so disciplined. And I think that that's something that I'm still working towards is the discipline in, making sure I'm planning the things that I need to plan before I go to a country, making sure I make those decisions so that I'm staying in like uh, a decent accommodation and a safe
Mm-hmm.
area, and that I'm doing the work that I need to do to continue this lifestyle. So there's a lot of micro decisions that you're constantly going into your head, and so I think, like I would say, it's it's a bit of a con because there's just constant chaos.
Yeah. But it's not enough to quit.
Yeah, yeah, this is the lifestyle. So like if you quit,
Yeah.
like what are you gonna do? What does quitting look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
even want to know what that looks like.
So is your contact that you have during the stays? more with other nomads or expats, or you also have friendships with locals, or?
Mhm. Yeah, so I like to do like I think the perfect breakdown is a third, a third, a third, so 30, 33, or 33, I guess. And a third locals because you get to really see the perspective of the city through their eyes. You get to know how much things cost and how tourism impacts them and how you can help them with their goals as well because it's different. It's just a very different perspective to be uh, seeing the city through a local's eyes and you just feel more connected to the city and the
Hmm.
culture. And then the second is expats because they're there longer, so they've built these community systems already. They have like the weekly meetups, they have the larger
Yeah,
community groups, but they're there for longer. So like they've gone through the process of like figuring out how to get cash in Argentina. Like they've already written all of the guides for that. And so you
yeah,
can just step in because there's this ongoing community that's so welcoming and accepting. And then nomads because I'm a nomad, so I identify with nomads as well. And it's also nice because then you can see people in different places that you go because they're also nomadic and you see them in other nomadic hubs. So I
hmm,
think that like that's been my perfect balance of friendships
yeah,
because it gives me different perspectives and also like yeah, just different ways of seeing and connecting with people.
yeah. Oh, that sounds like, yeah. I think of course, I've spoken to way more people, and it seems like you have such indeed a sort of very conscious, intentional way of how you want to connect to people and to the things around you, and very, yeah, like this third. It's really nice to see. It's very well balanced and very consciously thought through, I think. Yeah, cool. Well, that was actually the most important things. I always finish with, yeah, do you have a tip for other nomads that you would
Yeah, I
say this
think
is?
I think my tip for other nomads is maybe that intentionality piece. My company is called Travel Not to Escape because I've seen people using this lifestyle as a
Yeah,
way to escape their normal lives instead of doing the work that they need to do to understand who they are and what they need to change in their lives so that
yeah,
they're not escaping from their life, they're changing their life to become something that they want to live. And so instead of being like the two different people, the person that you are when you're traveling, the person that you are when you're back home with friends and family, like make that one person and bring those people along with you because then you're not running away from yourself anymore. And I think that that's
yeah,
the thing that I've seen a lot with other nomads that are just starting their journey is they haven't
yeah,
realized the you can make this the lifestyle and like be the one person that you want.
yeah. Beautiful. That's a good thing to end with, I
Yay.
think. Yeah.
Yay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all for listening to today's episode and getting to know a bit more about me and why I started Travel Not to Escape. As we discussed, the research Juul is doing is so important for digital nomads. If you want to participate, please go to digitalnomadresearch.com or on Instagram at digital.nomad.researcher, which is linked in the show notes. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me at Travel Not to Escape and stay tuned for our next adventure. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Travel Not to Escape podcast. I hope you found our conversation inspiring and insightful. And if you're ready to take the next step in your journey of self discovery through intentional travel, I invite you to join our vibrant and supportive community of solo female travelers over on Facebook. Inside our community, you'll find like minded women from all walks of life sharing their stories, experiences, and tips on how to make travel a transformative part of your life. It's a safe space to ask questions, seek advice, and find inspiration. To become a part of this incredible community, simply search for Travel Not to Escape on Facebook groups, or you can click the link in the episode description. I can't wait to welcome you into our tribe of fearless travelers. Remember, your journey of self discovery begins with that first step. So don't hesitate, join us today, and let's embark on this adventure together. Until next time, keep exploring, connecting, and playing, and safe travels, navigators.